There are absences that confuse the heart, not because someone left, but because something in you disappeared with them. You try to move on, but a part of you resists, because what you're truly grieving isn't only the person, it's the version of yourself that existed only in their presence. That rare, subtle feeling of being fully alive, the lightness in your voice, the clarity in your eyes, the courage to dream in color. It wasn't just love, it was recognition, not of them, but of you. Carl Jung called this enantiodromia, a soul's instinct to return to a forgotten polarity. And sometimes love is the force that awakens what you had buried in silence, not because the other was your source, but because they were the mirror, and you were finally willing to look. This is why the end feels like a spiritual amputation. You miss the way your soul danced when they entered the room. You miss the softness that bloomed in your chest when they saw you. You miss the self you were only just beginning to believe in. Bruce Lipton reminds us, biology is not destiny, but emotion can shape biology. And your nervous system, once dormant, awakened in that field of love. So now, when they're gone, it's not just a heartache, it's a disorientation of identity, a disconnection from a self you didn't yet know how to hold on your own. This is not a simple longing. This is the grief of being pulled away from the woman you were becoming. And in that ache, your soul whispers, "Remember her, shall we?" She didn't arrive because of them. She was always there, waiting beneath layers of quiet obedience and invisible sorrow. But in their presence, she dared to come out. Not because they were magic, but because something in their eyes told her, "You are allowed." You laughed with a softness you didn't recognize. You forgave more quickly. You desired without shame. You tasted moments instead of surviving them. And none of it was performance. It was the soul unclenching. Jung wrote that what we repress does not die. It waits. And when someone sees us in a way the world never did, we don't just fall in love with them. We fall in love with the mirror, with the recognition. Because finally you were not invisible to your own becoming. But now, the mirror is gone. And what remains is not just longing for them, but a subtle ache of self-abandonment resuming. That version of you, the one that breathed more freely, feels exiled once again. This is the deeper grief, not that they left, but that she disappeared with them. They say, just be yourself. But who is that self when the mirror is gone? Popular spirituality often turns the soul into a solitary island, as if we are meant to find ourselves in isolation, as if love is a luxury, not a sacred summons. But Carl Jung knew the self is born in reflection. We are not formed in solitude, we are constellated in connection. And some people, they don't just walk into your life, they unlock it. Not because you lacked wholeness, but because your wholeness was asleep. Their words became a key, their presence, a ritual, and suddenly you remembered the woman beneath the woman, the self beneath the shell. So when they vanished, the pain was not narcissistic, it was archetypal, because the soul had spoken through the bond. And now, without that mirror, the self begins to flicker again. The danger is not in having loved too deeply. The danger is in believing you must now exist without mirrors. The soul does not emerge in a vacuum. It comes alive through symbols, through presence, through sacred gazes that say you are allowed to be. So no, the call was never to just be yourself. It was to remember the self you became, and to ask the soul, where is the next mirror that sees her too? Not every presence is meant to become permanence. Some arrive like a spark in a dark corridor, not to walk with you forever, but to illuminate the path you had forgotten how to find. What if their role wasn't to stay, but to awaken? Their absence feels like a fracture, but it may be a sacred rupture, one that forces the question, how do I carry her, the self I became with me, now that they are gone? Maybe they were not a destiny, but a ritual, a moment divinely designed to remind you of a truth buried beneath years of forgetting. The psyche does not grieve lightly. When it mourns, it's often because something archetypal has stirred, a calling, a return, and sometimes the divine sends a presence not for eternity, but for emergence, a lover, a mirror, a flame. They came to reveal the part of you that must remain, even when the relationship cannot. So perhaps this is not abandonment. Perhaps it is initiation. It's not just memory that lingers, it's your body that still remembers, the softening of your chest in their presence, the aliveness in your fingertips when they laughed, the strange stillness that felt like home, even in chaos. You're not imagining it. Something in your biology shifted. Bruce Lipton reminds us that our emotions can awaken dormant expressions in our very cells. That belief and feeling can rewrite the chemistry of who we are. And around them, your nervous system believed in a version of you that had never felt this safe. So now, no matter how kind or lovely someone new may be, there's an invisible wall, because they haven't yet touched the self that came alive in that unique vibrational space. It wasn't just compatibility, it was a spiritual climate, a resonance. And that's why it feels impossible to recreate, because it wasn't about replicating gestures, it was about the soul finding enough stillness to rise. You haven't lost your capacity to feel, you've simply lost the atmosphere that made feeling safe. And until that safety is reborn, everything else may feel like silence, trying to pretend it's music. Sometimes the loss isn't just of a person, it's of a light that once lived in your own eyes. In Jung's language, this is the golden shadow, the sacred parts of yourself you did not yet recognize until they reflected it back to you. You saw your sensuality in how you touched them. You saw your wisdom in the way they listened. You saw your courage in how you opened, even when your history whispered close again. They were not just a lover or a companion, they became the canvas upon which your soul painted its brightest fragments. And now that they are gone, it's not just a relationship that has vanished, it's the mirror that once confirmed, yes, this is who you are capable of being. You ache not just for the bond, but for the self that the bond made believable. The question is no longer, will they come back? The deeper question is, can I still believe in her without the reflection? Can you remember that the light you saw wasn't only theirs, it was yours, shining back at you? And now, it is waiting to be owned, not borrowed. Some connections are not memories, they are myths carved into the soul. They awaken something older than the story you lived with them, something archetypal. You were not just in love, you were embodying a role, the muse, the rebel, the healer, the lover, and through that bond, your psyche found a myth to live inside. A script written not in words, but in deep, symbolic emotion. When the person left, the story didn't end. It simply lost its actor. But the role you inhabited, it still lingers. And when you do not honor it, it doesn't disappear. It returns as longing, as dreams, as creative stillness, as a whisper that says, there was more in you still waiting. Jung knew the psyche moves through archetypes. We are not merely people, we are characters in sacred dramas. So if you feel like something unfinished is still breathing beneath your ribs, it is. Not because you should return to them, but because the myth has not yet been given its final act. And perhaps it's no longer theirs to play. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. You scroll through old messages, replay conversations, touch photos like relics of a vanished temple, and still, something inside you remains unsatisfied, because the ache is not for them. It is for a feeling, the sacred climate of emotional openness you lived within their presence. A vibration that made your soul feel heard before words, a permission to be whole without trying. And now what you chase in their absence is not a reunion, but a return. Not to them, but to that energetic space where you're being expanded. You revisit them hoping to touch the same frequency, but it's not them you truly want. It's the forgotten self you met through them, and that's why it feels like madness, like obsession, like a loop with no exit. Because the soul remembers not events, but states, not timelines, but emotional truths. And it keeps circling back to the place it once breathed freely. This is not regression. It is the psyche's attempt to reawaken what it doesn't yet know how to rebuild. A longing not for someone, but for the symbolic world that allowed you to feel like yourself. Maybe for the first time. There are versions of us that only breathe in the presence of certain souls. And when those souls depart, what remains is not just silence, but the ghost of who we were beside them. She does not knock. She does not cry, but she lingers, in dreams, in scents, in sudden memories that sting without warning. And you ask, will I ever feel like her again? But maybe the task is not to feel like her. Maybe the task is to bury her, not as denial, but as devotion. Not every self was meant to survive the ending. Some were never meant to be permanent, only to pass through you like sacred winds, awakening what needed to be touched, and then returning to the invisible. Jung called this individuation, the soul's labor to become whole through the deaths of what was never truly eternal. You do not need to abandon her. You need to honor her, to build a life where her essence isn't lost, but remembered, where she is no longer a memory clinging to the past, but a thread woven into the tapestry of who you are becoming. To grieve her well is to not abandon her twice. This was never just about love. It was about identity, about remembering the shape your soul took when it was finally allowed to breathe. What aches now is not simply the loss of someone, but the dimming of a self you had barely begun to hold. You were not imagining it. That version of you was real. And the ache is the soul's way of saying, do not forget her. Do not leave her behind in old photos or unanswered messages. Rebuild her, slowly, softly, in the presence of new rituals, in the safety of new mirrors. In the quiet courage to love again, not someone else, but your own aliveness. Bruce Lipton taught us, we are not prisoners of our past chemistry, we are co-authors of it. The version of you that awakened in that connection can still return, through new emotional climates, through conscious presence, through a life designed to echo the energy she once lived in. Jung once wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Ulo. And sometimes it takes the loss of a mirror to find the courage to keep becoming. If you made it this far, comment Estoy despierta. Let her know you still remember. Let her know you're still listening.